Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the NWR Virtual Healthcare Day for November 2021. My name is Finn Blake, and I am your host for today. Up next this afternoon, we have Arovella Therapeutics. They're listed on the ASX under the code ALA. Now, Arovella is a biotech company focused on developing therapies to treat human disease. Arovella's two focus areas are oncology and conditions that impact the central nervous system. Arovella is developing its Invariant natural killer T cell therapy platform from Imperial College London to treat blood cancers. The company is also developing low-risk oral sprays to reformulate existing pharmaceuticals. Today joining me is Dr. Michael Baker, who is the CEO and Managing Director of the company. If anyone in the audience would like to submit a question for Dr. Michael Baker, then please do drop them in the Q&A panel on your screen. And then Michael will be able to get to them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, all over to you, Michael.
Wonderful. Thanks, Finn. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you to everybody for taking the time to dial in. And of course, thank you very much to NWR for putting on the event. And it is an exciting time for the company. Last time I spoke at an NWR event, we were pseudopharmaceuticals. So we're very pleased that we have finalized our rebranding with the new name Arovella Therapeutics. And I'm very much looking forward to taking you through where we are and, of course, where we're heading moving forward. The usual disclaimer. And just for a bit of background, so very, very clearly, Arovella Therapeutics is a biotechnology company. And what we focus on, as Finn just mentioned, are two focus areas. Cancer is the first, but also conditions that impact the central nervous system. And we're very excited by the most recent addition to our company, which is the inclusion of the novel Invariant natural killer T cell therapy platform, which we acquired the license to that platform from Imperial College London in about the middle of this year. And we are the only ASX listed company that's working on this particular cell therapy platform. And initially, we're going to be using that for the treatment of blood cancers. So in terms of our team, we have a very strong board and management team. And we've recently added 2 new directors to the group and a very senior management personnel who all have great expertise in the drug development arena, which is really important for these types of therapies being developed. We are also the only company worldwide to hold the patents for a drug called anegrelide, which we're reformulating that drug into an oral spray for the treatment of metastatic disease. And the reason we want to put it into an oral spray is we actually think that will be a safer product for the treatment of cancer. And for our most advanced product, Zoltan, we're pleased that only recently we signed up an Australian partner to commercialize that product. So that's Zoltan for the treatment of short-term insomnia. The company that we've entered into the agreement with is a multinational pharmaceutical company, Starter. They also have an option for New Zealand in addition to Australia. And we expect sales of that product to commence in calendar year 2022, which is quite exciting for the company. And for our partner, Teva, the world's largest generics manufacturer, we also had approval of Zoltan in one of their territories, Chile, which is the first of 3 territories that we currently have under license. So in terms of the company overview, we are currently valued at about $19.7 million. As of September 30 this year, we had $5.1 million cash in the bank. So we're not actively looking to raise money at the moment. In terms of our ownership, we aren't very concentrated at the top end, but we do have some very supportive shareholders that understand the drug development space, both high net worths, but also small institutions, which is great. But of course, we're always looking to and welcoming others to join the register that have a good understanding of what a biotech investment looks like. And of course, the returns that can come that have been demonstrated previously in this sector. Now, in terms of our company, this was a large part of the driver behind the name change. We have broadened, and now we have 2 platform technologies, the first being our cell therapy platform. And our most advanced product in that platform is the CAR-19 iNKT product, which is being developed for the treatment of particular types of blood cancers that have a marker called CD19 on their surface. That's currently at the preclinical stages. And our second platform is the Arovella platform, which is something we use to reformulate drugs from solid dose form and convert them into oral sprays. And so, as I mentioned, we've got Our most advanced product is Zolpimist, which is now approved in 2 territories, and that's a treatment for short-term insomnia. But we're also working with other partners in the space, Strides to reformulate sumatriptan for the treatment of migraine. And we're also working with Can Pharma Australia to reformulate a pharmaceutical grade cannabis product, and Sanofi as well, obviously one of the largest pharmaceutical companies worldwide, to work on one of their active ingredients, in addition to working with an agrolide, which we're developing internally for the treatment of metastatic disease. And so I'd just like to talk a little bit more about Zolpimist and some of the recent events that have transpired. So as I mentioned, this is a drug that has been developed for the treatment of short-term insomnia. Now, Zolpimist is actually our oral spray version of the insomnia drug known as Ambien or Stilnox, and it was formerly Sanofi's blockbuster drug. And in terms of short-term insomnia as a condition, it is quite prevalent, and it's been estimated to affect up to 9.5% of the US, which is already quite an alarming number. But what we've seen throughout the course of the COVID-19 pandemic is that we've actually seen a sharp rise in the number of mental health issues. And of course, out of that comes a lack of sleep. And so again, we see that this product, and in line with what we're trying to do at Arovella, we see that it plays a really important role in helping people live longer and healthier lives. And so in terms of the product itself, we have license and distribution agreements with Teva and Stada. And again, Zolpimist is already approved in Australia. And so Stada will be commercializing in that territory, and in Chile, and Teva are going to commercialize in that territory. So in total, for the total number of total population that we've got currently under license, it's over about 375 million people, with Teva covering Brazil, Chile, and Mexico, and Stada covering 25 million with Australia, but also they have an option for New Zealand. And as we move forward, we're continuing to have discussions to add additional partners to license the product. So I'd just like to switch gears a little bit now and talk more about the iNK T cell therapy platform. And as I said, this is something we're very excited by as a company. It's again, we only added it to the product portfolio throughout the middle of the year. And what we've actually got is it's an exclusive global license to use the iNK T cell therapy platform. And I will discuss what it is in a moment. For the treatment of human disease. So we can use it for not just cancer, but any other diseases where we think there can be an impact, and we've got data to support that would be the case. Now, in terms of a cancer treatment, why it's a little bit unique is that the iNK T cells from which the therapy is derived, they have what's called a T cell receptor, and I'll talk more about that in a moment, but that can bind or attach to what's called CD1D on the surface of some cancers. And when we introduce what's called a chimeric antigen receptor, which I'll also talk to in a moment, it means these particular cells in this platform has 2 chances to catch, stick to, and kill cancer cells. So it enhances their activity. And in terms of the first product that we're developing, we're going after, it's a well-known target in the blood cancer space, CD19. But what we can do moving forward, and we're actively pursuing this at the moment, is to look to add additional CARs that will enable us to target a range of different cancers that have CD1D on their surface. And as I mentioned, also potentially even other disease areas. Now, in terms of the industry, there is a bit of it's not, I wouldn't say hamstrung, but it's been a bit of a limitation for the currently approved cell therapies, that they must be taken from the patient that has the cancer. They must be taken from them and then re-engineered to be used and delivered back to that same patient. So we don't think for the iNK T cell therapy product, we will need to do that. These cells, or this technology, has been shown to be protective against that condition we're trying to avoid, which is graft versus host disease. So we believe the therapy can actually start from a healthy donor. And that means we've essentially got a starting point where it hasn't seen cancer, it hasn't seen chemotherapy or radiotherapy. So we actually think that from the outset, we should have a more effective product. And then in terms of also being able to start from a healthy donor, this goes a long way to simplifying the supply chain. And again, I think that's likely to have big impacts on the costs and the affordability of such a therapy, which hopefully will translate to us being able to get this out to more patients. And so for those reasons, we do expect that the platform itself, as we drive it towards clinic and look to build out the platform, that we should see commercial interest from large pharma. So in terms of the inventor, he comes from Imperial College London in the UK. And it's really important to point out, it is a top 10 university in the world. So it is one of the world's leading universities, putting it up there with Harvard and MIT and so forth. And in 2019, it was actually voted by Reuters as one of the 10th most innovative universities. So again, it's a very prestigious institution, and we are delighted to have licensed the platform from them. And the inventor himself, Professor Karadimitri, he's a medical doctor by background. He's spent his whole career looking at immune cells and their impact in cancer. And again, as a medical doctor, he sees the devastation that these diseases cause. And so it's really important, because that's clearly funneled through into his research, and again, provides a lot of drive for us to take this forward into the clinic. Again, he's got an excellent pedigree, and now he's the director and co-director of two prestigious hematology or blood cancer centres in the UK. And we're pleased that since we've acquired the technology, we've entered into a collaborative research agreement so we can continue to do more work with his research group to create new IP. But he's also now the chairman of our scientific advisory board for the platform. So just talking through the technology itself, there's a few things that go into it, but I just wanted to give an overview of what it actually is, because I think that is important. And the way we actually start for these types of therapies is we actually take the blood for the currently approved products, it's from a patient. As I said, in our case, we're expecting that to be from a healthy donor. And then what happens is you take the immune cells, you specifically use a technique called leukapheresis, and that helps us to take just the immune cells that we're interested in that can fight the cancer. We then genetically reprogram those cells. So they produce these what are called chimeric antigen receptors that face the outside of the immune cell. And then we grow those up into very large numbers. And when we give them back into the patient, that chimeric antigen receptor on the outside of the cell is something that will then go and find and kill the cancer cells. And so what we've seen really since, it's probably earlier than 2017 when the first drugs were approved, but it has really ushered in a new way of thinking about cancer treatment. And really it's primarily driven because of the effectiveness of these types of products, where we're actually using the word cure. And that's a wonderful place to be when we think about a disease like cancer. And certainly now there are 5 approved. They're all CAR T products. And as I said, all of these products rely on using a patient's starting material as the initial product to manufacture. But certainly for 2 of those products, Kymriah and Yescarta, Kymriah's in 2020 had more than $470 million in sales, and Yescarta had more than $560 million in sales. So again, a very important treatment modality, and we're very pleased that we're building upon this type of technology. But it is important to point out that, so we don't have a CAR T therapy, ours is an iNKT therapy. And this is a really important point because, as I said, we are the only ASX listed company that's working on this particular cellular platform. And again, when I talked before about we take a blood sample from the patient in our case, or in previous cases, or a healthy donor, what you have in that sample is a lot of different immune cells, and they're slightly different in different ways, and they all have slightly different roles to play. But things like macrophages, NK cells or T cells, and in our case, iNKT cells. But we can consider them as the soldiers of our immune system, and their job is to go around surveying the landscape to making sure that everything that doesn't belong is actually eliminated. And that's why we're so excited by the iNKT cell therapy platform. It's because they are, and again, hence why this little soldier's already armed, they're one of the most potent naturally occurring immune cells, and they already naturally target cancer. And so we also know that once they become activated to target cancer, they activate other immune cells and recruit other immune components to help in the fight. Now, they also have something what we're referred to here as the invariant T cell receptor. And that's important because it doesn't change between one human and the other. And that's what enables us to be able to use these therapies off the shelf, because they don't cause graft versus host disease. And so from the research that we've performed, we've actually been able to show that the iNKT cells for cancers that have CD1D on their surface, they perform better than the conventional cells when they're combined with chimeric antigen receptors. And again, I wanted to just go through this as well because it is important. What are chimeric antigen receptors? And imagine we start with the immune cell. That could be one of the types that I mentioned just before. And then we take the chimeric antigen receptor, which is something that would look like this. And we actually make the immune cells produce that chimeric antigen receptor. What it has at the end is something very important that we can select that we know will then drag the immune cells and help them to find, attach to and kill the cancer cell. And so that, in this case, this would find what we call CD19. And so then we end up with an immune cell that has all these CARs facing outwards onto the surface. And when those CARs are able to attach to CD19, that's when we have destruction of the cancer cells and recruitment of the other components of the immune system. And so when we think about our platform, the CAR-iNKT cell therapy platform, that's why I mentioned before, it's dual targeting. And this is, again, enables us to be differentiated from others in the cell therapy space. So they have the iTCR, that's something I mentioned before, that's naturally occurring, it's already in the cells. We program them to have the chimeric antigen receptor as well. And then when we give the cells to a patient that has cancer, what we see is the iTCR will find CD1D, and the chimeric antigen receptor will actually find the antigen that we select. In this case, it would be CD19. The moment that happens, the iNKT cell will release components that trigger the destruction of the cancer, as well as recruiting the other components of the immune system. And so that's what we've seen from the data. And again, this was largely a big driver for why we wanted to acquire the technology from Imperial College London. The preclinical work demonstrates that this is likely to be an effective off-the-shelf therapy for the treatment of blood cancers that produce CD19. And so the preclinical data has demonstrated very clearly that our lead product, ALLO-101, has very strong activity against cancers that produce CD19. And it also demonstrates that it's more efficient at clearing the tumor cells than what we've seen for conventional cell therapies as well. And that's highlighted here in this picture. Again, I don't want to go into the detail of these studies, but what we're looking at here is anywhere there's the bright color, that's cancer. And it's only with our therapy when we treat the mice that we see that after 3 days, the cancer has been eliminated. And so again, importantly, that translates into longer term survival of the animals as well. So what we see here is that on the vertical axis, we've got how many animals are alive, and on the horizontal axis, over how many days. And we see that it's actually out to about 95% at 90 days for the iNKT cells versus about 60% for conventional cell therapies. So this work really validates the use of iNKT cells and CARs to target CD19 to treat cancers that express or produce CD19 on their surface. And so where we're at the moment is we're expecting to select our manufacturer for the product in Q4 of this year and develop this further towards clinical trials. And so since we've acquired the technology, we have had some good successes already. As I mentioned earlier, we've entered into a research agreement with Imperial College London. It's very important that we have that relationship to continue to build out and to create new IP, which is important. We've recruited a really experienced cell therapy manufacturer, Dr. Sandy Buchanan, and she will lead the manufacturing efforts. Again, having that level of experience and the relationships in place will be a big benefit for us as we develop the product towards clinical trials. We've also recruited 2 board members, both with cell therapy, deep cell therapy domain experience, Dr. Deborah Barton and Dr. Liz Stoner. We've assembled and expanded the scientific advisory board with the inventor of the technology, Professor Kara Dimitri, chairing that board, and 2 really well-known immuno-oncologists, Dr. Ruben Benjamin and Dr. John Mayer, joining that board. And Dr. Ruben Benjamin is he was the chief investigator for the clinical trial for the first off-the-shelf clinical trials. So again, very nice that we've got that level of input when we're going to embark upon a similar journey. And Dr. John Mayer also was one of the pioneers for the technology that went into using the chimeric antigen receptors. And so, as I said, we're currently in the process of selecting a GMP manufacturer. Once that's done, that's when we can start developing the product to move towards clinical trials. And as we go through that process, we'll interact with regulators to ensure we've got everything that they deem necessary to clear our IND before dosing a patient in a phase 1 clinical trial for cancers that produce, or blood cancers that produce CD19. And another really important point is that as we move through this stage, we'll also be continuing to find new CARs and technologies to add onto the platform. And again, we see that that's an important way for us to be able to build out and really leverage the platform nature of the technology. So in terms of early stage cell therapy companies, the valuations are still quite high for even early stage companies that are in phase 1 or even phase 2A, which is still quite early. As I said, I've just presented a range here from the US, but ranging from just under 800 to just over 200 million. And of course, 2 local companies, Chimeric Therapeutics, which has one technology in phase 1 and another preclinical at just under 100 million, and Prescient Therapeutics with 3 programs, all preclinical, but again, valued at about 145 million. And since we've acquired the technology, it's been a bit of a flurry of activity in the iNK T cells therapy space. So just to put this in context, if you looked up T cell companies, there's probably hundreds. Same for NK cells, there's probably dozens. We are one of 4 commercial entities that are working on the iNK T cell therapy platform. So we do feel that we're in a very good spot. It's emerging, but we're very pleased to have licensed the technology. But all of the companies, including our license of the technology, have undergone some commercial activity in the last 6 months or so, with Appear Bio raising $52 million in their Series A and then entering into an $875 million strategic partnership with Kite Pharma. And Inkt Therapeutics, they're at phase 1. They just listed on the NASDAQ last month and currently valued at about $550 million. And Cure Therapeutics, acquired by Athenex in May of this year for $70 million upfront in cash and equity, and then $115 million in milestone payments. And as I said, Arovella, we're valued at around 20 million, but we do see that there's value to be created as we progress our therapies towards clinic and also build out our pipeline. And in terms of the team, we have a really solid team. I think that's been, behind the technology, but not far behind. I think it's just equally as important to have a great leadership group. And that's something we've worked hard to assemble. Certainly Paul doesn't need much of an introduction into the biotechnology space. Myself, I have a research career followed by drug development, venture investing before joining Arovella. But I'd like to highlight the two newest members, Dr. Deborah Barton and Dr. Liz Stoner. So Dr. Deborah Barton, she is a medical doctor by background that specialized in oncology before moving into large pharma companies like Advanced Accelerator Applications, which was acquired by Novartis, before moving into biotech and some well-known cell therapy companies. And she's now currently the Chief Medical Officer of Charisma Therapeutics. And Dr. Liz Stoner, who, again, a wonderful breadth of experience ranging from early stage research as an assistant professor at one of the US's leading universities, Cornell, before moving into large pharma and then ultimately into investing, where she is now an executive partner at MPM Capital. But Liz was also the interim CEO of another company, Sema Therapeutics, that went on to be acquired for $950 million US. And so we've also got David Simmons on our board, who brings a wonderful element of corporate governance and compliance, and David Phillips, who again has a career that spans many aspects of life sciences, right the way from large pharma through biotech and venture investing. And so I'd just like to summarize. So what we've got at the moment, I think, is really it's an exciting platform for the company. As I said, we are the only ASX listed company that's working on the iNK T cell therapy platform. We're one of a handful worldwide, which is a great place to be. We believe we've got an excellent leadership group with extensive drug development experience, particularly cell therapies. And also we believe that because we're really now at the leading edge of cancer treatment, that we're in a great position to build out the pipeline and not just from a technology point of view, but also from the team point of view. And of course, as a little biotech, it's nice to be able to say that we're expecting to have a product in market in 2022 with the commercialization of Zolpimist in Australia and Chile. And with that, I'd just like to say thanks again very much to NWR for putting on the event, but also, of course, equally, thank you very much for everybody's attention and taking the time to listen in.
Thanks so much, Michael. That was a great overview. We've actually got a couple of questions here if you've got a few minutes left. The first one being, are there some success stories that you can point to in this iNKT space that you kind of hope to follow?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a good example is Invariant Therapeutics. So they're doing something similar to us, but they're actually using the native iNKT cells. So they're not using CAR receptors. That's their ultimate goal. So we feel like we're actually a little bit more advanced in that front. The advantage for them is they do have a product already in clinic, and that's for a COVID-19 treatment for patients that have acute respiratory distress syndrome. But again, having the success of listing and having a $550 million company when Arovella is valued at $20 million at this stage, I think it'd be a nice place to be if we're shooting around that mark.
And so, Michael, what can investors expect in terms of news flow looking forward?
Yeah, I think key steps moving forward are really getting the manufacturing organised, and that requires a series of individual components. And so we'll be putting out news flow when each of those components gets assembled and ready before ultimately having the product ready for clinical trials. But again, I think, as I said, we're going to continue to look to build out the platform, not just working with our CAR-19 CAR, but looking to add other things to the platform as well.
And Michael, one last one. What's the main reason you're confident in the Arovella business as we approach the new year?
Yeah, I think it's really, for me, it's finding good science. Good science underpins good drug development, and good science comes from the world-leading institutions and world-leading scientists like Professor Carrie Dimitri. So that's a good foundation for us to launch from. And I think then the second thing behind that is good team. And I think the quality of people that we've been able to add to our board since acquiring, and our management group since acquiring the technology, is testament to where we sit in the space. And again, I think, not to harp on it, but I think to be one of a handful of companies that are working on this platform, I think it does put us in a very good position. And now it's just up to us to execute and capitalize on where we sit.
Dr. Michael Baker, I am very grateful for your time today. Thanks so much for joining us. Really excited to continue watching your story.
Thanks, Finn. Appreciate it.